Hello, hi everyone. In this video, I would like to show you how to create a business role. So we have four business roles: before, after, assigned, and display. So let's first understand what is a business role. A business role is server-side logic, and basically you can write a script on the business role. It's a server script, and why we need a business role, in which cases we are using the business role, when exactly the business role is taking place. So that's the first thing what we need to understand. So for that I just prepared something else, like which going to explain, for example, when exactly the before business role is taking place. So I will just open an application here. So Need IT application that I'm creating from scratch, not downloading from the GitHub repository. Let's say I'm on the form level here and I want to put a certain date. Okay, I put a date here. I don't want this date to be in the past. It should be in the future, because this application is basically submitting a request and they want to fulfill the request before a certain date. So logically, if you submit a request today, you want to be done some date in the future, not some date in the past. So that's the logic. So when you enter the date, we have to make sure that this date is exactly, it's in the past, not in, no, it shouldn't be in the past, it should be in the future. So that's kind of business rule. But when exactly is happening is, you have to see here, information is loading to the database, which means on the form level you can do different operation. You can complete an update, you can click on this button and save, which is actually what we are doing is you're sending some information from this form to the database, right? So you're from one point to another point, you're directing the information to the database. So you're sending information. So while you're doing this action, when you click on the submit or save that action, and before is getting updated on the database level, which is, if I zoom back a little bit, before it's getting updated in the database level, and when you're clicking on the submit button, for example, is running in between that slot of time, the before business role is running. So one pretty good example that we have here that you can find as well in the training, if you go to learn training, you can find out the training how to write a client a server script, and you have the you have the explanation for the business rule, and as well the example, which is like taking two values from the form. For example, let's say I want the value of the request type and what needed in the short description need to be sent to the database. So instead of typing legal and putting other, for example, you can put like this, legal other, for example, and then doing this for every record, you're gonna automate this step. So you're gonna run a business rule which is going to take two values from two different fields. If you take this as a table, two different columns, and it's going to put on one field and then update it. So you can run the business rule exactly at this time before the operation is getting updated on the database level. That's the before business rule. And when you create a business rule, you actually choose a table, and the table you choose in our case is depending on the application you created. Here is the Need IT application, and there is a specific table for this application. Okay, so let's move on to see another business rule, the second one, display. This one, it's kind of specific one and is going to create an object. So let's first see when exactly the business rule is taking place, when exactly we're gonna run this, it's executing. So when a form loads or record is loaded from the database, as we saw before, we are sending the information from the database here by clicking on submit. The action is sending the information. Here on the in the opposite, we are taking the information from the database, which means if I go back to the my application, and let's say I go back here, let's say I click on this record, what's happening is querying the database not display this information. There are two steps. One step you click, you're querying, and in the other step is going to look for the information in the database and then bringing you to your form, to that take that data and then you put it in your form so you can manipulate, you can use the form. So before, in between that time, in between the form when you click and in between the time before the form is getting rendered, this is the term we use, and you can run the business rule which is called display, which is actually going to create an object. The object name is G Scratchpad and is created by this business rule, and is going to pass this object to the client side. And when it's passing this object to the client side, you are actually able to use this exact object in your client script. When you use, but it's kind of a little bit confusing for me at the same time, because what is confusing, because the client script is basically used when you want to manipulate information on the form level. You are not using any information from the database level, but in this situation the business rule is sending an object to the client script, and you are using in the client scripts something coming from the server side logic, and you still call it client script. But this is the way how it is working, and we are still calling client script, so we are not going to change that. So that's the way it is. Now let's see another one, which is after business rule. The after business rule, it is actually happening, is executed once the database operation is done. We have seen just a few minutes before when the before business rule is happening, and then it is the database operation, it's occurred, so the database getting updated. But once it's updated, the after business rule can be run, and specifically after the database operation. Why? That was the question when I was the first time. Why we need a business rule once you have done your operation on your database level? What is the need of having this business rule? So in order to answer this question, we have a pretty good example in the training, which is here. Use the after rule to make changes to the child record after the parent record is updated. This is the one I wrote, but basically if you're running a business rule on a specific table, and that table can have related tables, and related table can be the child table. So if you want the child table taking the same update done on the parent level, so the parent record, you can run a business rule after once the database operation is done on the parent level. So on the parent table, on the parent record, you can use another business rule which is going to update the child record, and it should be done before even the child record is displayed. So that's how it's written in the training. If you go back up, okay, so I cannot find now, but this is how it is done. So after business rule, it comes after the database operation. If you understand this, it's fair enough, and you know when you can use it. And assigned business rule is exactly the same, but is going to be much more faster. Why faster? Because the way it's run, the way the program is compiled, the code is read by the computers is using a different path. So let me show you let me bring back you to the training, and business rule, controlling when business rule. And if you go to async, it's written here, assign business rule executed on a different processing thread than before and after business rule. They are queued by a scheduler to be run as soon as possible. This is going in much more in depth. I didn't went that much in depth. You need to understand what is the processes, what is a thread, what is a scheduler, and how this thing works in order to make this thing happen faster than the after business rule. So you can do the research to understand what is a thread, because it's you have something called a process. Inside a process you have different thread, and it's going to allow you to execute the code faster than the after business rule, for example. That's the way it works. So it's more in the hardware level than the program how is read by the machine. So you should use, as is faster, you should use this business rule when it's time critical. Here an example given is SLA calculation, which is time critical. So once you updated the database operation, it's good use the assign business rule, which is going to be faster to calculate the SLA. So it's not getting paused or this kind of thing, it's immediate. So these are the business rules that we have. We have seen the display, before, after, and async. The first business rule I have learned to write is the before business rule, this one, but we are not going to see this example, but we are going to see another one, which is actually what I was talking about in the beginning, checking the date that we have here. If it shouldn't be in the past. It should be it should be in the future, because the request you're sending, for example, to a team, they're gonna receive, and it's not logical to have a request in the past date comparing to the current date, right? So that's we have to check when you're going to put the date at this level. So let's first understand the code that we're going to write, and then we are going to write the code. Okay, so I'm going to open, this is a NetIT application, not the one I have created from scratch, which is this NetIT BIS, don't contain any server-side scripts. So the first script is this one, and this is the script we are actually going to write, which will allow us to check the data if it is in the past or not. If it is in the past, stop the operation. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, and we have to first understand what is going on with each one of them. How once we understand, it's going to be much more clear if you want to write your own after. So that's how I progress. So let's see the first thing. Sorry, not this one. Okay, this one. So let's look at the first line. Zoom again. So the business rule is going to prevent user from setting the when needed field value to a date in the past. Okay, it's going to prevent that. The first line is defining a variable, an object variable, and storing the current date. In order to do that, we are going to use what we call a class. New glide date time is a class, which is actually taking the current time, the system time, this one, and is going to actually take that time and put in an object. Okay, and if you want to understand a class object methods, you need to have a little bit go through Java programming, for example, object-oriented programming, how this thing works. A class is basically a blueprint which can create multiple objects, and it will take much more longer time if I start to explain what is a class and everything. What you have to understand at this point, a class is going to allow you to create the object. Let's imagine that you have for example, an object, real life example, a table, and you want to create a lot of variation of tables. So wooden table, plastic tables, whatever you have in your imagination. So the table have their own characteristic. Okay, so they have their own height, size, everything, and for a table, and the table can be used for something. Let's say those are methods, like for dinner, even for studying, office, workplaces, I don't know, whatever. It comes to your imagination. So they have their own properties and methods. Let's put it in this way. And you want to create as many tables you want. The first thing what you do is to create a class which is going to contain all the variables, which is like the height, size, all this kind of thing. I mean, here the type, not the exact information. We are not writing in the class the height is 15 meter, this kind of thing. What you're saying in the class, you're putting the structure of the table should have. You say height, you define the variable height, you define the variable color, you define the variable type, you define the method, which is what is it useful for dinner or this kind of thing. So you actually write the blueprint, and when you're going to say new glide date time, you actually create the object the way you want. So if you send some parameters into the, let's say you can have also a constructor inside the class. If you send some parameters, you can create a type of object. Okay, so if you want a table which is wooden at this size, at this height, all this kind of thing, you can create an object by sending those parameters, and you can create the object. Here we are not sending any parameters. What we are doing is just using the class, which is allowing us taking the time, the current time that you have in your system, and then putting that in the object. Okay, and what we are doing at the second line that we are creating another object, but this time we are sending some parameters into the brackets. What parameters we are sending? This time we need a date. The date we need is the date that we have here, right? Whenever you enter a certain date here, that need to be stored in an object. And how we are going to do, we have to locate this object and take this data. The way we do it, so we are actually using the same glide date time, because we are talking about time here, and the parameter is going to be current. Current is an object of the record, the glide record. So the object here is the field where the current, we are locating the field, and we are mentioning the name of the field. When needed field name. So we are giving this information so it can take the date and then send it to the when needed object. So we have here two different objects which contains two different dates. One contains the current time, one contains the time that we have entering on the form level. Okay, so the next thing, logically what we should do is to compare those two dates. If we compare those two dates, if when needed it comes before right now, which means that the date you have entered is in the past, stop the operation. Okay, so that's what we do. We have to set a condition. The way we do is like this. So if when needed dot before right now, so when needed we know this is the object, okay, which contains the date of the form of the field when needed, and the before is the method of the glide time class. It's another method which is going to allow us to compare two elements, the right now time, so with the current time which is stored in the right now object, and the other time which is on the field level. So if this condition is returned true, is going to execute the next level of the code that we have. But as you can see here, we have a certain type of syntax here, another type of syntax here, another type of syntax here. If you want to make sure how it works for each one of them, all you need to do is to go here. For example, I'm here in before. I just did the research, like I go here, I type before, and I click on search. It's going to give you some result, and you can easily find out, like here you can see API 990, so not 990 matches method before, and you click on that, you have the explanation, how it works, all these kind of things. So in order to know how the syntax work, and you have also other methods you can check one by one. That's how you can find out how things works. So if this condition is returned true, it's only true or false. If it is true, which means you have entered the date in the past, what we are going to do is to send an error message to the system. So display error message as print output, like print output or print in other languages. like in the same way we are displaying in information, and we're gonna stop the database operation. The first thing we are going to say, when needed date cannot be in the past, your request has not been saved to the database. So that's the error message that we have to put. So in order to do that, we are going to use the object GS, which is the object can access the Glide System API. We have talking before classes. Now we talk about API. I still need to investigate why we have differences in this kind of why sometime class, why sometime API. But let's understand what is this code specifically is doing. So the Glide System API contains a method which is called add error message, and is going to actually how to say display a specific error message.